What up? What up? It's your man Sean P coming in live. This is the Sean P Experience. That's right. We are kicking off 2025. This is the first show of season two on YouTube. For those that are brand new to the show, I am Sean Polador, podcast host, multi-published author, among other things. And this is the Sitting with the Griots Sean P Experience, where I have authors, filmmakers, avid readers, and more talking about what they do to inspire and motivate the next generation of people. Today is no exception. I have a very special guest, Dr. Candice Nicole Hargons. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
Man, I'm excited. Like I was saying backstage before we came, this has been months in the making and getting the art copy and watching all your posts as you're doing your process, just revving up to it, man. It's finally showtime. So I'm excited and can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah. Let me do your proper intro before we get into the weeds of it. Do the proper intro. We have Dr. Candice Nicole Hargons is the award-winning associate professor of counseling psychology at the University of Kentucky, where she studies sexual wellness and liberation. She has published over 50 research articles, has been featured in Huffington Post, APA Monitor, Good Housekeeping, Women's Health, Brevity, Essence, Cosmopolitan, and the New York Times. I'm letting y'all know who you're talking to right now. Give us some hands out for the royalty in the building.
Yo, listen, let me tell you how long it's been since you got that bio. I'm at a whole new university. I'm at Emory University now. It's been that long. We've been trying to set this thing up for a hot minute. Listen, and the book had the old thing, like it's just been that
That's
long.
crazy. Okay. Well, hey, I tried. I tried.
It wasn't you. It wasn't you. It was not you.
So let's get into the weeds of it, right? So off the top, I want to know this answer. You have it was the number one release on Amazon. So I know in the literary world, it's kind of like tennis or golf, where they celebrate like, oh, thank you. I want to know how you really felt whenever you saw that number one on side of your book. How did that feel?
It felt great because I like what I wrote. I really love what I wrote. And so for it to resonate with some people, it was number one in my category, not number one in Amazon, right? So I think it would have had a different reaction depending on those levels. But for me, I was like, look, for the work that I do, I'm mad grateful because that means that people are rocking with me. They were willing to support and buy it. And then my hope is that they read it and that they enjoy it and it resonates with them.
So out the gate, I want to say it like this question. When a person sees a title like good sex, they're walking by and see that title, their mind have a thousand thoughts. And when I describe the book to my friends, I'm trying to tell them what this book is versus what they think it is. You tell the audience what this book is not for the audience. What's this book not?
Hmm. Okay, this book is not just laying out like the different sexual behaviors you should have. It's not a book that teaches you how to do certain sexual skills better. It's not a book that only people of one genre or generation or demographic should read. It's not a book that will have you feeling guilty or shamed or lower than. So those are the things that it's not.
Yeah, I really appreciate that response because when a person sees good sex, some folks they're thinking like it's gonna be 1,001 positions and what to get
Yep.
into and how to put your leg and this not what this particular work is. It's a beautiful book. I got all my tabs and everything.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I have way more questions than time. Trust me. Right?
Okay.
Um, so what brought you into majoring and being an expert in the field of sex?
It started so early for me. So I write about it in the introduction chapter. I just always been a precocious kid. So I was an avid reader. And I found myself looking for things about human development, sexual development really early on because I just wanted to know when I was going to develop. And so I was looking for those things and finding out, trying to put stuff together, overhearing my aunties talk about their experiences while I was getting my hair braided. And just wanting to know more and wanting to be grown. And so when I realized as I became an adult that, talking about sex was easy for me, I didn't kind of shrink from those conversations. I realized it could be a career, and I was becoming a psychologist. And one of my mentors was like, yo, you can do the research on this too. And I didn't even know sex research was a career option. So when I found out that it was a career option, in addition to being a sex therapist, I was like, that's really what I want to do with my life, and just been on that path.
That yeah, your introduction, and I love how forthcoming you were about your experiences and coming of age and how that all manifested. That was a wonderful, wonderful touch to the book, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Also, tell us about your formatting choice. So every chapter, you start off with like one of your clients or a scenario and what they were going through. Then you give your principles, and then on the backside, you show how they used it, how they displayed it, how they got better using it. About that format, tell us about that choice as a writer.
So, Tamala Gordon, I was working with her as the developmental editor for the book. And I was trying out different formats at the beginning to see what kind of landed. And she was like, I really need more on the beginning side to get to know these characters, because I was doing it more like a vignette. These are fictionalized renderings of clients or research participants I've worked with. And she was like, I want to know more about them. I want to like dig into their stories a bit. And I was like, the stories are carrying people emotionally into what I'm going to write about scientifically. And so she helped me dig deeper into sharing some nuances in the people's stories. And then at the tail end of it, after I gave a little bit of the science, discuss some of the strategies, bringing it back full circle for each set of clients or individual person to be like, and this is how it played out for them. It doesn't have to play out for you in that same way, but this is a possibility.
And I am so glad you mentioned our sister, Miss Gordon, because I had on the show last year for her wonderful, amazing book, Hood Wellness. So what was it like
Yes.
working with her as an editor and going back and forth with her? What was that experience like on the
It was
editorial journey?
it was a great journey just because she was also writing, editing, finalizing her book and going on that publication journey almost like a year before me. So she was fresh to the experience on the author side, but had a lot of experience on the editing side. So she was serving in two roles, not only as the person who was reading all of my drafts, but kind of modeling for me. This is how you build your author community and your author voice. And I was watching, like, oh, this is who you meet up with. She introduced me to you, right? And so she was like, these are the people who really gonna read your book, and let it resonate. So I got to see on the writing side her developmental editing process, but then on the author side, like some possibilities for me.
Man, I love that. I love that each one reach one. And
Yeah.
I've had a few Row House authors on the show. Thank
Yeah.
God for Row House. Thank y'all very much. Y'all wonderful people over there. So this has been a wonderful relationship as it's growing, right?
And we
So,
appreciate you for hosting us and for amplifying the work that we're doing.
oh man, the honor and the pleasure is all mine on the Show and P experience, right? Anybody else on Row House you want to have a platform? Come on down. You got an open invite, right? Um, you did the audio book. You did a wonderful job on the narration.
Thank
I can just
you.
brag about that. The past 2 years, I've been more and more ingesting my books via audio.
Hmm.
And I love whenever the author reads their own work at the most. So tell us about your audio experience, what that was like in the studio, going through it. I've done it before. I know it's kind of tough. It's difficult. So give the audience an idea what it was like really, really doing that process.
So, first of all, I had to audition to read my own book. I had to submit a clip of me reading the book, and they had to make a determination that I was going to be the one to read it. And for me, I was like, if anybody's going to read this the way I meant it, it's going to be me, and most people still aren't as comfortable talking about sex. And so the things that I was talking about in the book, I was like, everybody ain't going to want to say WAP. Everybody's not going to want to say, giving head, sucking dick. Like, people are not going to want to say the things I'm going to be comfortable saying. It's so I
Yeah.
was like, I want to be the one to read it. So I auditioned. a few weeks later, the people at Row House were like, "You're going to be able to read your own book." I was so excited, and so they set me up in the studio here in Atlanta, and I got a chance to go in, read, do it through Spotify, and the process was new to me because back in the day, I used to want to be a rapper, right? So I was just hyped to be in the studio.
Wait a minute,
I
wait
felt
a
like I
minute,
was
wait a
laying
minute,
my
Doc.
own
Wait a minute.
track.
You got boys, Doc? You got boys?
You know, I used to have some bars. I don't
Doc,
really have
come on,
bars
man.
like
Come
that
on.
anymore. But yeah, so that's what the process was. And then I didn't get to hear it before it came out. Like it came out and I heard it that day. I was like, I'm gonna start listening immediately.
Yeah.
And I'm just enjoying hearing how how they edited and produced
Yep.
all the ways that I read it.
Now, let me ask you this question real fast on the editing part. I mean, on the audio part. After I did my experience, I advise all of my writing friends, you have to hear yourself
Yeah.
reading it because it really, really changes. Like what you meant on the page is different. When you find it saying it, it's like, you know what?
Hmm.
I don't need this word right here, or I need another word. So does it change your writing going forward is my question.
It does. And I always advise my mentees the same thing. I'm like, you got to read this out loud to know how it really sounds because in your brain, you're replacing words with what you really meant. You have a different idea about it in your brain than when you hear it out loud. So I'm reading it and I'm like, oh, why did I say etc. twice back to back? Like, I don't want this in there. Can we edit it out?
I try to tell all of my friends, you have to go in that booth like one time. And I
Yeah.
have so much more respect for narrators, right? Because some people, I mean, it's the whole skill set to itself, to be honest. It's like being a rapper
Yes.
or a singer. That's what they do. So all
That's
the
right.
narrators, they live their life doing that. Respect to them. Shout out to them because it's not easy.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go down to your choice of using the analogy of food as a parallel to sex, right? So I love food. I'm a foodie, by the way.
Right. Right.
So in your
And where
whole
you at?
setup,
Louisiana? Y'all have some good old food. So
we do. So in your setup of this whole book, use a parallel of sex and like food. Every chapter is like the ingredients to have a good night. Give us the reason why behind that concept, food analogy.
this was another thing that Tamla helped me with. So when I started the book, I had an analogy in the introduction chapter of like you making your sexual debut like a cotillion. And I was referencing like the history of that for Black culture and what that meant. And she was like, this isn't really landing in the way that you might want it to. And I was thinking about it like, okay, I didn't have a cotillion. I'm thinking about it in a way that I didn't even have that. It doesn't reference like my experience, but what do I really love? Some good food, right? And I was like, everybody got to eat. Everybody understands what unseasoned food tastes like and that you don't want it. What it means for something to be bland, and they know what adding spice and adding seasoning can do for a food. And that everybody likes different spices and different seasonings, different ingredients. And so when I thought about it that way, my husband is a chef. He helped me kind of unpack what a seasoning versus a spice is and how, how like what the staples are and all of that stuff. So I was like, okay, he helped me and Tamla helped me kind of refine that. And once I got it, I was like, I'm running with this.
Yeah. So your husband is a chef.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
like, what's your favorite dish of his? Is what I would say. What's your favorite? Like, man, make if Valentine's just passed. Like, babe, make this Valentine's. What was that?
What don't I love that he makes? He makes a fire jerk chicken. And so that's his specialty. That's his thing. He'll make some good jerk wings, but he'll make a gumbo. He'll make a Cajun butter chicken. He'll make Indian food. Like he just loves
Hey,
chefing it up. That's his jam. And so I'm always eat it.
I gotta holler at that. I gotta holler at
You
that.
do. You do.
I
And
gotta holler at
he
that.
lived in Lafayette, Louisiana for a little while. And
What?
so yeah, he picked up some
I work.
things
I,
from
I work in Lafayette. That's where I work.
what?
I'm like 15 minutes away.
Yep. Yep. So he lived there for, that's
Yeah.
when we met.
So
He was
yeah,
living here. So,
he
you
can cook.
know,
He
y'all
can
be
cook.
good. Yeah.
He can cook. Yeah, you say less, as they say. Say less. Say
Right.
less. Say less. Say less. So I want to ask you about your. I love asking research questions on this show. I love hearing the author talk about what went into their publication. And this book is a lot of science, good science, case studies. You got breakdowns, all this stuff. Tell us about the research process you have for the book. And I want to know, like, what didn't make the book? What couldn't make the book?
Mm.
I love that question.
Okay, so on the research side, I conduct a lot of sex research. So I wanted to frame the book, and the ingredients that I chose are from a research study led by my team, me and Dr. Shamika Thorpe. And that's how we got the ingredients to good sex. And then I reference research that is relevant to each item of good sex based on whether it was representing people with a bunch of marginalized identities, whether it was rigorous research, and whether it was something I could translate in a way that could resonate with everybody and not just other researchers. So, and I think about the communication chapter, and I was breaking down like the threats that people feel in communication, and I'm like, oh, I can break down threats to self, threat to your partner, threat to your relationship real easily. I think people will get that concept, and I can explain it scientifically, but not too heavy on the jargon. So I was looking for research that I could reference that made sense, that built out the concept, and that let people know like research is for all of us.
And speaking on the research, I want to break this down for the audience that maybe you didn't go to higher education and stuff like that. So a
Mhm.
person sees a case study on Instagram, just going on a reel, and they see something that says, a percentage of these kids, blah blah blah. They don't
Mhm.
understand like sample sizes. They don't understand the variables used and how that
Mhm.
manipulates the outcome. And you see like a flat thing on this reel right quick.
Yep.
Tell me the importance of breaking that down, because you mentioned in the book, even trying to get some of the concepts in your research, certain demographics of people is not really solid research on it. Certain
Hmm.
communities, for
Yeah.
example.
What you're talking about is so good because it's like there's a statistic about something like 25% of people did X, Y, and Z versus research. There's so much that goes into the process of this deciding what your research questions are going to be. Then finding things and ways to measure those questions. So it might be I'm using a survey. Was the survey piloted with people who look like me, or was a survey developed on people who are from majority cultures or dominant cultures? And then you get into like, after you get the results, how are you going to interpret it? Are you interpreting it with scientific rigor, with knowledge of the community, with cultural awareness, or are you interpreting it in the most negative way you can just to prove a point? And I think a lot of people miss that, especially when you see statistics about Black people. They're kind of framing the story in a negative way. And it's like, we got a lot to offer, but you need to be a scientist that understands that.
Man, that's good. That's good. And the additional question was, I love this question, because there's the cutting room floor. Everything can't
Oh,
go
yeah.
into the book, right?
Hmm.
So what's something that you wish, like, man, it just couldn't make the cut? What's something like that for you?
So as I listen to it now, I wish I could do a revised edition because there's so many more things that I would say. There are there's a lot more I would say in the sexual good sex is safe chapter about contraception and about consent. I said some things, but there's just more I would say there. And I couldn't fit there's so much research on sexual health prevention that I couldn't fit all of that in there. There's so much more to be said about like desire and arousal. And I think there are some really good books that say that, but getting into like there's so much science that I could fill in, and I had to be so selective, like studies about what type of lubrications are best. And there's a evidence-based list of the different brands of lubrication. I could have put that in there, but like there's so many pieces where I was like, I got to make a cut somewhere for the sake of cohesion and flow. So let me drop this off.
So for our writing friends out there, we discuss all the time like nonfiction versus fictional writing. And some people always think that nonfiction has to be just flat stats,
Mm,
data. There's no soul, there's no heart, there's no emotion driving it. So explain us the process of like having this data and stats in all the case studies, interviews, but then still having beautiful writing. Sometimes it's humor, sometimes it's other things. Explain that process to our writing folks out there.
mm. Yeah, the way I want it to come across is like this is a Black woman writing this book. A book that can be for anybody and everybody, but the person who wrote it is a Black woman. And so the way we story tell in our community had to come through, right? I got to be able to laugh at some things. I got to be able to laugh at myself. I got to be able to talk about Cardi B and, share how me and my clients talk with each other and how they might be like, girl, like those pieces had to be in the story for it to really be a Black woman's book. And so I had to weave that in the storytelling, like the way we play the dozens, the way we talk with each other and about each other. And I've been writing since I could write. I've been writing um, poetry and short stories and fiction, in addition to nonfiction and research articles for a long time. So that skill set was woven in there because it was always in me. And I like writing plays, all kinds of stuff. So I love writing. I deeply enjoy writing. I didn't want to just write a book for the sake of saying I had a book. I was like, I want to come through as a craftsman in this writing.
So let's kind of play with the idea for a little while we can. You having that poet background makes sense because we were talking about like Clinton Smith and Sister Honore Jeffers, some other people, like they have this large poet background, and then whenever they're writing nonfiction or fictional, like all out novels, the prose and things that they're
Yes,
using is this beautiful, beautiful
yes.
writing.
Hmm. And I think that part of it, like the prose in particular, I wouldn't say I was able to use the level of figurative language I would use if I was writing like narrative nonfiction. This was more leaning into like prescriptive and self-help. But when I write the next book, I shared this, me and my husband were talking about this, and I told him, I was like, this is my first and worst book. The book I write next is going to be better. The book I write after that is going to be better. I love craft. I love working on it, revising. And so I want to write a book where I get to use even more of those poetic devices and those elements because that's in me.
So could we expect like different kinds of books besides like books like this in the future? Like totally different genres and
I would love to be able to write different genres. I would like to write for TV, poetry, plays. Like I like to write. So if given the platform and the time and space to do it outside of the window of my full-time job, and once my baby gets a little older, because I got a 1-year-old right now. So I was writing this pregnant and then nursing. And so that's what I shared. Like I'm doing the best I can. As I wrote the chapter, I'm like, I'm nursing a baby right now as I write this chapter. Like, just
yeah,
being honest
yeah.
about my journey. Me in my prime, when I'm getting sleep, yes, I want to write it all.
She said when I'm getting sleep. That was good. When I'm getting sleep.
Right,
You had a good chapter on that about relaxation. It was a real good
right.
chapter on that.
That's
For those
right.
that's watching. Um, you mentioned about being like like nursing and writing. So for the mothers out there watching this show, they might sometimes feel like, man, I have these other things. I can't be a writer. I can't be doing podcasts and interviews and book tours. Tell them what it was like writing during that time for you. Because you are very transparent about what was happening while you were writing the book in real time.
Yeah.
Talk about that,
Mhm.
please.
It was two labors of love at once, like creating my baby in my body and writing about good sex the way the baby came to be. Like that was like me creating in two ways. So I feel like there was a lot of creative power in me. And a lot of times mothers don't recognize that our creative potential to bring human life in the world is a creative resource we can tap into for our art, whatever your art is. But in the context of your community, people got to give you the space to breathe and do. And I know for some mothers, unfortunately, they don't have that space and like ability to write and regular, like put a practice into place that feels perfect for them. But even if you just do 5 minutes a day, even if you just do like, all I got is a sentence before I got to do something else, giving yourself that bit makes a difference. I'm so grateful to Ramon, my husband, who set it up so that like I could write and he would be supportive and encouraging and feed me good things, and then when the baby came, like we shared that responsibility. He's a full equal parent. And so that for me makes the difference. Like him being with our two boys right now while I do this so that they are well taken care of and I can handle this. And then we're going to swap out when I get home, and so he can get a little bit of breathing room and do his thing. Like that made a big difference for me.
We have a few writers in the chat right now, and one writer in
Oh,
particular, we was talking about your choice you made. You was talking about this earlier a little bit, like using these fictional clients to be a vehicle for the story. How difficult was that? Was her question she had to me. She was like, "Did it get tricky for your clients? Like, are your clients reading the book? Like, is that me? Like, what was that like? I just trying to find out, is that my story?"
I tried to put a lot of fiction around it and a little bit of like changing people's identities and never disclosing anybody's confidential information so that I wouldn't breach anybody, because that's a sacred trust between me and them, right? And so I'm like, that's just against my ethical code. That's why I had to make it fictionalized. Some of it's from research. These are people who chose to share their stories with me for publication, and I kind of weave them together so that nobody is identifiable.
Thanks very much for the chat. Shout out to the chat in the building. Love y'all so much. My incredible friends. Uh, my first, like, in the weeds of the book kind of a question. You mentioned the
Mhm.
7 different types of intimacy concept. A lot of times in society, if you just type the word intimacy, a person only pretty much thinking about like one thing. That's the only
Yeah.
way they see it. But tell us about fleshing out some of those other concepts and other kinds of intimacy for the
Ooh.
viewers.
Okay. So this comes from Dr. Shamira Howard's book, Use Your Mouth. And she broke down those 7 types of intimacy. And I used them with clients so much. I was like, I got to feature that. Like, that's important work. So making sure I cite her. But it's intellectual intimacy, emotional intimacy, spiritual intimacy, financial intimacy, social intimacy, and which ones didn't I say already? Physical intimacy and sexual intimacy. So a lot of people conflate like intimacy with sex. They think you mean sex automatically. And it's like, that's one specific type, sexual intimacy. You can even have physical touch, physical intimacy, closeness with someone, and it's never sexual, right? Because me and my babies have physical intimacy. So we have emotional intimacy. Most people think about that like getting to know somebody really deeply in their emotional world, what their moods are. But my jam is intellectual intimacy, like a conversation like this, sharing knowledge, ideas, talking about things like that. That's my jam. So I think everybody has an intimacy that similar to how people think about the love languages. I liked her model better than love languages as a Black woman, especially because I feel like she broke down additional nuances that people needed.
That's good. That's great. That's great. And that goes back to your chapter on communication, one of my favorite chapters in the book. That was a amazing chapter.
Thank
But like
you.
a person first needs to know their own, what they prefer themselves first to be able to communicate while they're in that dating phase. Like, I need this particular aspect, you know. Sure.
Okay. So there's a way that I name in the chapter. There's a way to communicate that I think a lot of people could learn from, right? So it's like Some of us are so guarded that when we communicate, it comes out abrupt because it took us a lot of courage and energy to say the thing. So it seems like it's coming out abrupt and aggressive, but really that's the person feeling vulnerable. And so acknowledging that if you didn't have the opportunity to learn communication skills, you might be awkward at it. And that's why I give some strategies in there for like, here's some things you need to lay out in the beginning of the relationship. Here's some ways you can practice it that bring some levity to it. So it's not like saying the worst stuff you can possibly say to people, but revising it if you need to, running it back and being like, "Ooh, boo, I was out of pocket when I said it like that. Let me run that back."
And the next concept I love a whole lot in this book. So many parts, and it's so much, y'all. Please go and get it. It's so many things in here. But the next one was the attachment theories. The
Yeah.
attachment theories. Because so many people have interesting family dynamics and childhood situations that show up later on in your life and your relationships and everything. So could you please explain to the family some of the attachment styles and how that
Yeah.
plays out in relationships?
So you have a secure attachment, and according to the work I cited from Stan Tocken, that's called an anchor. This person isn't afraid to get close to people, but they also don't have to get so close that they smother somebody. They have a good balance. Then you have an anxious attachment. That's a person that feels always insecure about the context of the relationship. They need a lot of extra affirmation. They can be perceived as clingy or needy, but it's really because they fear that they're not loved or cared for at the level that they really need to be. And then you have a person, and that would be called a wave. Then you have a person that has an avoidant attachment, and that person needs a little bit more space. They might come across to people as distant or not wanting to get too touchy feely or connected to people because they feel overwhelmed by too much closeness, or they really do want closeness, but when they get it, they don't quite know what to do with it. They don't quite trust it, so they push it away at a what feels to them like a safer distance. That's called an island. And so these three attachment styles are pretty common. Most people are somewhere in the middle around anchor, but interestingly enough, the waves and the islands end up finding each other. And so then they end up in a loop where it's like one person is chasing the other person is running away. And then the more they run away, the more they get chased. So that's a loop that a lot of people find their relationships in. And depending on the relationship, you might find you were more of an island with somebody, but then you meet another island and you like, now, why am I feeling needy all of a sudden? Because that dynamic can change.
And this is why I kept telling my friends and people around, just talking about the book for a few months leading up. Just as I'm going through the challenge talking about it, it's so much self-work in this
Mm,
book. Like everything besides just the bedroom itself.
yeah.
Understand your attachment that you're dealing with.
Yes.
Understand your 7 levels of intimacy, the one that you need the most. Understand those things. That's a self job
And that's
before
what
even
the
going out
sexual
there to somebody
liberation
else.
is. Yes. It's to learn yourself, to have that sexual self awareness so you can ask for what you want and what you need.
Right, right, man. So good. So good. Let's talk about the different ways that we define fun. Another fun
Mm,
chapter in the book. And how does that carry over to the bedroom and the relationship? The way you and a
yeah.
person, how you see fun and excitement and stuff like that.
Some people really like thrill fun, and that's the more like energetic type of fun. And some people really like more chill fun, and that's the like low energy but still enjoyable type of fun. And so knowing what kind of fun you enjoy then translates into your sexual experience. So if you like thrill fun, you might want to try some new things, have some novelty, switch it up, and if you like chill fun, you might want to do things that are more sensual leaning. You might want to have moments where you get some like rest, some peace, but in an enjoyable manner. And neither is right or wrong. They're both really good. It just depends on who you and your sexual partners are and which all, whether you can switch it up with each other or whether both of you are already on the same page.
And once again, it's just another great chapter. And it's something a person probably won't think about. They wouldn't think
Mm-mm.
about how they define fun, how would that even impact them in the intimate parts of their lives. It was a really eye-opening chapter to think about.
Thank you. Because you want to be able to laugh with your person. You don't want to take yourself too seriously. Like, you want to be able to enjoy the experience and have some levity. Because sometimes sex can be like portrayed as this really highly serious, moralistic thing. And it's like, this is supposed to be enjoyable.
Yes, yes. You mentioned earlier about hip hop. I had a hip hop question for you. I love hip
Okay,
hop. And
let's
so
go.
in the book you talked about the good sex being wet concept, right? You
Hmm.
mentioned artists like Cardi B and Glorilla, Megan Thee Stallion, and the brand of hip hop feminism. And it can be a positive expression, but it can have unintended consequences. You mentioned.
Hmm.
Give us more elaboration on that concept when it comes to women today in hip hop and what they're doing.
I love all those artists. Those are my jams. Like, if I'm listening to something more modern, it would probably be them. But also it can come, so it's like it can come with like empowerment, like enthusiasm, reciprocity, asking for what you want from your partner. They come with it. But some of them can also be like making this hierarchy, and this is hip hop all the way, making this hierarchy of like, I'm better than you, and I'm better than you because I got more money, more cars, more clothes, more, I'm better than you. So that's where that comes from, and it helps set people up to a maybe unrealistic standard. I don't know if you and I are around the same age. I'm in my early 40s, but when we were coming up in hip hop, having an expedition was the jam. Like, you remember Wayne? I pull up in the expedition. Like, now you got to have a Bugatti, like, right? And that's unrealistic for most people. And so I think about how hip hop talks about sex in the same way. It's like everybody isn't going to be wet or wettest all the time. It's like you need to use additional lubrication. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't need to feel bad about yourself. And so that's how I frame it. It's like hip hop, we be trying to take it real far. Like, we try to outdo each other. That's a part of the culture, but it can have some negative consequences.
So they got the brand new song came out with Bruno Mars and I think it's Sexy Red, some other artists like that. And
Ooh,
I've heard some various commentaries about that. Have you heard that song yet?
I haven't heard it yet.
Oh man, I thought you would have heard it. Okay. So I think the song is called something like Nasty or something like that. I don't want to mess it
Oh,
up,
look into
but
it. Okay.
it's like they're trying to almost one up the WAP
Hmm.
song, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of older people have their opinion about hip hop anyway. And like
Hmm.
the explicit lyrics and where they're going with it is like, she said, sing it. I am not singing that song. No, that's not happening. She said, sing it, Sean. No, I'm not singing that song. But I love to ask my hip hop friends that are ladies their thoughts on the women just being further and further with the content and what they're saying. Like, how do you see it as a woman yourself? You know?
Yeah, I don't think it's that much further. Like, Put It in Your Mouth was a song when I was a teenager. So WAP is like, okay, pretty normal. Like, Tip Drill was out when I was in college. So none of this is surprising me. It's pretty much par for the course with hip hop. We try to one up each other and take it to the next level, but blues music from the early 20s and 30s was very sexual in content, and rock music is very sexual in content. Right, exactly. Somebody said slob on the knob, right? Like, that was a normal, like, we used to listen to that all the time. And so I don't think, for me, it's not upsetting because probably I'm just used to talking about sex and thinking about sex. I think is a normal part of the human experience. I like it to be normalized, but I also consider that if it sets you up to have unrealistic expectations for what the sexual experience should be like, that's when we have to be critical consumers of hip hop.
Somebody said she said tip drill. Yeah, all of that. Yeah, yeah. It's been crazy for a long time. It's been crazy. You're right about that. Um, this next chapter I want to talk about is the relaxation. That's not talked
Mhm.
about enough. And you
Mhm.
mentioned in the book about like us in this society, like right now in particular, the past few months. I think we're all overly stressed,
So true.
worried, anxiety, anxious. A lot is happening. And like in the old days, well, in the past, it kind of was in your mind more than reality. But like this is real stuff. That's
Real.
people are losing jobs. Things are really, really happening. So this chapter on relaxation, I think, is a very important chapter for us to discuss. It methodizes on how to go about relaxing, how to go about breathing and stuff like that.
Yeah. Um, you hit the nail on the head. It's a stressful time. I was just talking about like how much is on a lot of people's shoulders as they kind of wait, holding their breath around like, am I going to have a job? Am I going to be able to provide resources for my family? And I feel that too. Like, so thinking about sex as a possibility to relax, I would say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, men have understood this in ways that a lot of women haven't understood this for a long time, that sex can help relieve tension and help you relax. And so I'm wanting everybody to kind of understand that, to draw closer to yourself or your sexual partner during this time, for you to enjoy each other, to take your time with it, to have sex that brings that stress level down, is one of the things you can control, because a lot of the time, like, a lot of this is out of our control. We can resist, we can, participate in protest, but the day to day of it is not in our control. But how you relax your body and how you enjoy each other can be a part of that.
I never like doing the whole gender game, like guys, this, women, that.
Hmm.
But sometimes some things apply. Um,
Yeah.
I think we have mastered compartmentalization to a degree, to where it's like if things are going wrong in like our everyday life, when it comes time for the bedroom moment, it's like we have the ability to like, and if they turn it off or have amnesia, right? And sometimes the
And
ladies
some
can be
and
more like it's
sometimes
still in their
we
head.
yeah.
You still having a child, right, man? Did I do the dishes? Is the food put up? Is the food out? Is it thawing? And got school tomorrow? Is the clothes in the washing machine? Like all those things can be running instead of relaxing in the moment.
And they call it emotional labor, right? So who's carrying the load of all the things that need to be done? And I find that when couples, and I love Black people in particular for the way we share the load more equitably than other couples, we can kind of balance that out a little bit more. But a lot of times when women are having to like carry that mental load of all the things that need to be done, the checklist of the world, then it's like, oh my goodness, how do I set that aside to and get to relaxation? And I was having a conversation on a book club yesterday, Black Women Read Too, and we were talking about how you can like ask your partner to help you relax before you get into the sexual experience as a part of a way there. And it's like, hey babe, I need you to touch me for me. Like, can you massage my feet for a few minutes, or massage my shoulders without like moving down my back too fast? Like help me to really relax and get out of my head and into my body. And so I think that relaxing and using sex in that way can be really important.
We have a question from the chat. Would you say that engaging in a menage a trois is oftentimes how some of us use sex as a means to relax? Was the question. Menage a trois was specific.
I'm not sure. Like, I think that that can be one of those thrill experiences more than a relaxation experience for a lot of people, unless a menage a trois is kind of consistent for you. Because usually, when you're thinking about relaxing, it's not something that feels exciting. It's something that helps slow your nervous system down a bit. So, for many people, and this may not be the case for everybody, having a menage a trois, menage a moi. It's a menage a moi. It's not a menage a trois. So, masturbation. Yes, absolutely.
I
Solo
didn't catch that
sex.
with the
I
comment.
didn't
I didn't
catch
catch
it
that.
until
Yeah,
I read
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah. Go
Yes.
go go ahead with it.
So, yep. That's when I read it after Aaron. I was like, aha. Yes, absolutely. Solo sex, masturbating. Yes, very much so. And moving through the process slowly, romancing yourself, taking good care of your body, treating your body like you would want a romantic partner to treat it. Absolutely a way to relax. And I'm gonna use Menage a Moi from now on. Thank you, Aaron, because I love that.
So let's go into one of my favorite chapters about good sex being communicative, and people struggle with communicating about their sexual needs and what they want. Because it's like, to me, it's interesting. Sometimes a person can do a lot of physical things with somebody and go all the way physical, and they feel like I can't say this to this person. I can't talk about this. It's like y'all did all these things way over here, and you can't say this. Like, it's interesting to me.
That's so true because people will just kind of go with the flow when it comes to sex. You can actually be passive doing all those things, right? You can just be like, the person's going to turn me this way, or I'm going to turn them this way. We don't have to talk to each other. We're communicating with our bodies, but we don't have to be direct and say what we want and say what we mean. So practicing the skill of expressive language, expressive communication, and receptive communication is really important. So expressive is you talking or like making a point, sending a message. Receptive is you listening, really hearing what the person is trying to say and receiving the message. And practicing both of those skills is necessary. A lot of us didn't grow up being really good listeners. And so you hear what you want to hear or what you're used to hearing instead of what is said. And so I talk about that where like sometimes you're afraid to communicate something with your partner because you don't want to hurt their ego, or you don't want to portray yourself as not knowing something. You don't want to like, feel inadequate. But being vulnerable with each other in your communication can really make sex good. It improves your sexual satisfaction. You get to try things that maybe you were afraid to communicate, but now you did. You find out your partner is with it too. Like that makes a big difference.
And so, in this communication conversation, it's definitely a great time to talk about further consent and being more specific in consent and what's going on, what's about to happen, what we cool with. Especially in the time of all these things going on in society, once again, it's a lot happening that we all seeing it left and right. And the consent communication conversation part got to be talked about more.
Over and over again, too. A lot of people think consent is like we had one conversation, we said what it was, and then everything else after that you consented to. And it's like consent is an ongoing, ever evolving thing because you can change your mind right in the middle, and the person should respect that, right? And it's like if you don't have the ability to say no to any and everything, then you can't really fully say yes. If you feel afraid to say no, you cannot really fully say yes. It means maybe you're doing it out of duty or obligation or coercion or fear. So I appreciate consent conversations. And some people think it dampens the mood. But honestly, consent can be super sexy. And talking about what you will and won't do at the outset is such a great starting point. But you need to let each other know that. And if anything ever changes, you can still consent or not consent to this.
I made an analogy of going down this road with all these stoplights, and you happen to
Mhm.
hit a good stretch of 5 or 6 green lights. You just coast. And that 7th light, the red, you can't just keep going because you had 6 green lights. Like,
That's right.
okay, all of a sudden it's a red light. We gotta
You
stop,
still got to stop. That's
Yeah.
right. I love
Yeah.
that. That's a beautiful analogy.
Question from the chat. Can sexual chemistry be built, or do you just have to have it or not? It's the question by Winifred. Thank you.
That's a good one. I think the jury is still out on whether sexual chemistry can be built. Some people have the capacity to build it because they're willing to take the time to do the seduction, do the romance. Some people only open themselves up to people they're chemically attracted to. So whether it's physical or some other sense in the body, like they smell real good and it opens you up, something like that. So I think that it depends on the person, and I'm not sure what that thing is. It's like I'm the type of person where sexual chemistry can be built, especially if the person knows how to talk about certain things, and it's like getting to know them over time can help build sexual chemistry. Some people are like either I rock with you from jump or I don't, and they cut off any opportunity to see if the chemistry can be built. So they never really find out whether or not it can. And so if you might be a person who is like, I can't just build with anybody. I just got to be feeling it. maybe the next go round, give yourself a chance to get to know the person and feel if chemistry can evolve. And if not, it's not. It's okay. But I think a lot of times people don't give it an opportunity to really progress.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the questions from the chat.
Thanks
Keep
for
the questions
asking.
going if you got them. We're gonna try to get to them before we get out of here. In your chapter called "Good Sex is Satisfying," you had a subtitle. You're probably not a nympho. You're probably not a nympho. And we live in a day and time where people love throwing around buzzwords. And a lot of folks like to self-diagnose, or somebody
Hmm.
might just assume something about you and just call you a certain label. You might take that on. Tell us about you're probably not a nympho and about the sex addiction and things of that nature in that chapter.
Hmm. I think most people come into it with this idea of how much sex is too much sex. And a lot of times people have these sexist ideas about what that is. So they might think, well, for me, it's not too much sex, but for her, it's definitely too much sex. Right. And so you get these labels like nymphomaniac. That's from, I can't remember the year that it came out, but somebody's really unscientific dissertation was like talking about if you like chocolate, if you masturbate, if you like good food, then you're probably a nympho because women shouldn't be exposed to these things. And it's like, what? Where did you
It
even
was
get this
it was
from?
the late
But
1700s. I'm looking at it right
there
now.
we go. There we go. And I'm like, how did we get here from there? But it's because people have their own ideas about what that standard should be. But instead of just minding their own business and applying that standard only to themselves, they want to project it onto other people. And I'm a big proponent of mind your own business when it comes to that. It's like, are you having sex in a way that is fulfilling to you? Are you maintaining other areas of your life that are important? Are you experiencing like pleasure and joy and fun and all these other good sex ingredients? Then you're probably not a nympho. But if you find that the sexual experience is one that you can't stop, like you feel compulsively drawn to it, such that you would forego your other work responsibilities, your family responsibilities, if it's something that feels like you got to do more and more and you can't figure out a good balance for your life, then maybe you have compulsion in the sexual area, still not necessarily an addiction, but something that might need to be worked out with a mental health professional. And that's okay.
And it's good how you started that about the guy that supposedly did this case study and broke this stuff down because being in psychology as well, we look at the history of psychology and the people that made a lot of these
Mm.
things that we use to this day, you understand their background and the kind of guys they were. Like, why are we even standing by these particular guys' standard? I don't
Right.
understand. Why is that
Mm-mm.
still standing? Like, I don't get it.
Because it gets passed on as knowledge and truth, and nobody's critically examining it. But we're of an age where we can be a little bit more critical, a lot more critical, honestly, and be like, now who is this person saying all that? People do that to me all the time, and I'm a whole ass scientist. So we should do it to people who are no longer with us, who have these theories that haven't really even been tested.
And so many of those things have been like debunked over the years. So many people have
Mhm.
dismissed these things that were supposed to be tried and true. And it's like, that's not. And they will still
Yes.
hold on to these standards.
Yes. And sometimes people hold on to standards because they want to believe them, right? Confirmation bias says that if it's something that you want to believe, even if it can be proven untrue, if you get something that sounds close enough to scientific language, it's like, see, that's what it is because you want to believe that and you want to be right.
Right. So in your subtitle for the book, the last part is strategy for sexual liberation. So now that you're on tour and you're doing book talks like this, what are some of the things that you're hearing about the book from the community
Mm.
that they're learning from the book and like, man, I'm so glad I read this. What's some of the feedback you've been getting, Doc?
It's definitely been like, I learned so much about myself. I didn't even think to write down that I have yeses, nos, and maybe so's, or I didn't even realize that I say that I feel worthy of pleasure, but I'm not prioritizing it at all in my life. So people just willing to confront their own the discrepancies between who they think they are and who they actually are showing up in the world as has been really good. And a lot of people willing to challenge those family and childhood messages that they got about sex. A lot of people heard that sex was taboo. You don't talk about it. You don't do it until you're in this specific type of relationship. People willing to think through, like, does that actually serve me? Does that work for me? And I love that.
That is so awesome. I'm, for one, so glad I read this book.
Thank
I
you.
will be
What
advising
hit
it
for
to my
you? What was
friends.
the part where you were like, oh, wait, hold on?
Say it again?
I said, which one hit for you? What was it, the part where you were like, oh, wait, hold on now. This is,
Man, I like the attachment styles
yeah,
chapter early in the book from the gate. I was talking about that with so many people because
yeah.
once again I have a psychology background as well. I work in the field too, so
Oh, yeah. So you already know.
some of the things you were saying in the book was just resonating. Like wow, But that particular part of the book, out of everything, that and the communication chapter was two of the main ones that was just going back to it. I already had read the book before the audio came out. Whenever the
Yeah.
audio came out, I went through it again, and yeah, it was this. Yeah, it's great stuff. Highly
Oh,
advise it. Going forward, go out there and get it. So thank you very, very much for your time and thanks for saying
thank
yes,
you.
coming
Oh,
on the
yeah,
show.
absolutely.
I totally appreciated it.
And thank you for having me and working with me so we can get together and do this
Yeah,
talk. It's been a joy.
yes it is. Yes it is. When you write in the future, whatever you write, I love returning guests. So you write stuff in the future, I'll be a beta reader, I'll be an ARC reader, and you can definitely come back on the show. We can do promo, whatever you need. I'm here for you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thanks to this dope community. I love these questions y'all were asking. This was wonderful.
Yes, yes. Thanks for the chat. Thanks for the chat. The future viewers that are watching it on the playback, chime in the comments. I will answer back on the comments. And man, I want to say that before we leave. Follow her Instagram page. She was asking some amazing questions for months. I look forward to it every week. Like I can't wait to see what she's gonna say.
I'm about to get back to it.
Because it'll become a talking point. Like off of your
Mhm.
Instagram page, it become an actual talking point to discuss these things. It was very, very good information in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Well,
Yes,
y'all
ma'am.
take good care.
Thank you. See you next time.
Bye.